Okay. All right, now we're good. All right, we're on. So thank you once again for coming to another wonderful Tanya Tuesday. And today is going to be a very joyous occasion because the entire class is going to be about joy. So we had done the chapters about sadness, and then we did one chapter about loving your fellow as yourself. And now we get to go into pure joy. So if just to remind you, in chapter 26, all the way through chapter 31, I like to call it troubleshooting, where we discuss when people have different issues that are preventing them from doing what the Tanya says you should do, which is you should meditate about God. And that will bring you to want to study Torah and do mitzvos, because you want to get close to him. But sometimes the meditation isn't working. Maybe you have too many worries, physical issues, too many spiritual issues, or just your heart cannot be affected. No matter how much you meditate, nothing works. And so for that, we had the later chapters of chapter, I believe, starting in 29. Let me just double check. So for that, we had chapter 29 and 30 and 31 to discuss what happens if you have spiritual insensitivity and the different ways to break yourself, crush yourself, and almost bring upon a small level of depression. But we said in chapter 31 that that is not the goal. Goal is that ultimately you should not remain sad, you should become joyous. Now he's going to start off this chapter and jump right into joy. So chapter 32 was kind of separate, talking about loving your fellows yourself, as we mentioned, according to some opinions. Sorry, not according to some opinions. It was not actually included in the original Tanya. It was added in later. And in this chapter, we're going to start off saying that joy is really the way to go. Joy is really the way to go. And we already know that, but he's going to start off with meditations for joy. So previously, we had meditations, how you can be happy even though life is so bad. That's what we've discussed till now. Now he's not even going to start with anything bad. He's just going to say, I want to give you reasons that you should be happy. And that's how he's going to start. Because joy, as we have said in other times, is the key to being successful in our inner battle. What is our inner battle? As we explained in chapter 7 and other chapters, chapter 13, all the different chapters, as we've explained, is we have within us a godly soul and an animal soul, and they are at war with each other. And we need to, meditate and help our godly soul win that war, so that the animal soul doesn't pull us down. But it's not always so easy. And here he's going to say, if you have joy, joy makes it easier. And so I'm going to give you ways to be happy and joyous. I want to mention another interesting point about this chapter. In, I forget what year, in the 70s, I think it was, the Rabbi came out with what was known as the 12 sayings. Okay. Rabbi came out with 12 sayings. He said there are 12 things, 12 statements every single child and adult as well should say every single day that will give you life, vitality, and meaning and purpose in your daily Jewish life. And two of those 12 statements are in this chapter. So that just shows you how important and powerful this chapter is. Two of those statements are in this chapter. Okay. So with that being said, let us start right away the chapter. And if you have the Tanya, it's going to be beginning of chapter 33. So on page 369 in the Practical Tanya. So he says like this. Here the screen. And he says like this. Chapter 31 taught us two uplifting meditations to find comfort and joy following the deeply humbling meditations of chapter 30, 29, and 30. But in chapter 31, the insights are limited to joy that comes through mitzvah observance. So it's not a joy that comes after a sadness. It's joy just in what we have to do. Here in chapter 33, we learn, in chapter 31, they are limited to joy that comes through mitzvah observance. Here in chapter 33, we learn a further meditation that brings joy, a joy that is not dependent on any activity, time, or place. It is a joy that flows from your essential being and presence of God found in your soul, your body, and in everything. So, unless you're happy even before you do anything, which will make it easier to do something. It says like this. Another method to find true joy in your soul, particularly when on the specific occasions when your heart becomes desensitized, you see that it needs some sort of cleansing and it needs the light of a joyous heart. So it's very interesting. It's very interesting because at the beginning of chapter 29, we started, if your heart is insensitive, you might need a little bit of depression to break through it. Here he seems to say that you may not need depression. You may need joy. Joy may be what's going to break through your desensitization. You may actually be too sad. You may need to bring into your life a little bit of joy, and that is what is going to allow you to do what you need to do to win the war against your animal soul. So I personally pick joy when I can. And not just me, the Rabbi was always a big fan of joy. Tell people, why be sad when you can be joyous? Let me rotate this. Okay. I'm on the right page. 370, yep. So he says, so how would you bring joy? He says, what you could do then, what meditation could you do that will bring joy is probe deeply in your mind, picturing mentally and cognitively the concept of God's genuine non-duality, which we discussed in chapter 2021. So what does he mean? So just to recap, chapter 2021, we said there's a concept that we say in the Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. So what does it mean that God is one? Any thoughts? Anybody remembers? What does it mean that God is one?
There's one God that we believe in, one God that we pray to.
Good. So that's usually what people think of when they think God is one, that there's one God, not multiple gods, or
Monotheistic.
And God is everything.
God is a unity.
Very good, very good. So the simple meaning of God is one is that there's one God. But the deeper meaning of God is one is God is everything, so to speak, that everything is a part of God. So God is one means God is the only one, really. There is only God. It's not that there's one God and there's a world and they're two separate things. Everything in this world is nullified and subsumed within God. Okay? So let's continue to read about that. And we'll explain why that brings you joy. So let's continue. Tanya briefly recaps the main themes of chapter 2021. How God fills all the worlds, upper and lower, and even how this lowly physical world is filled with his glory. So number one, he's saying God is everywhere. Number two, and in his presence, everything is considered zero, literally. As we explained in chapter 21, meaning in God's presence, everything is subsumed within him. So the world is truly subsumed in God's presence, and God's presence is everywhere. And now he continues, quoting from the High Holiday Prayers, and all believe that he is one alone in the upper worlds and lower worlds, literally, just as he was alone before the 6 days of creation. So that means not only is God one and everything is subsumed within God, to the point that there is only God now, just as there was only God before the creation. So you tell me, how is that possible? There's a world, as he says. And even in this space, where our world was created, the skies and the earth and all their number components, just as he was originally alone filling the space, now too he is alone without any change whatsoever. So how is that possible? How is it possible that there is a world, and yet that world is as if there is no world? Because we say, just like before everything was created, the same thing is now. He says, because the separate identity of all creation is literally voided in his presence. So the fact that we see a world is almost an illusion, as we explained. Because in truth, if we would be able to truly see the world for what it is, we would see it as being subsumed within God. The Tanya now recaps the illustration we learned earlier about the source of language in the soul. So Hasidic philosophy, a lot of time, employs parables to bring out its points. It employs different examples. It can give you an idea. We always have to remember that these parables are trying truly to describe something indescribable. And so you're always going to leave the parable or the example feeling wanting more, because it's not going to fully describe the concept. And the same thing is going to be over here. We're going to give you some parables that will allow you to appreciate the concept that something exists, but it's really nothing. But it won't fully describe the true nothingness that the world experiences in the face of God. So his example is going to be, as we mentioned in chapter 20 and 21, is speech. So I, as a person, there's a lot to me. I have a deep core character, a soul. I have emotions. I have thoughts. And I have many thoughts. What is one thought compared to the many thoughts that I can have? What is even a thought compared to the core of who I am? And then I have when I say words. How many words do I say in my lifetime? And what are my thoughts compared to what is my speech compared to my thoughts? You think a lot more than you speak. Your speech is just a minuscule revelation of what you think. So the first example is one word compared to the entirety of a person's life, right? So if you were to say, I'm going to define Rabbi Adler by this one sentence he said, that one sentence is really one sentence I said of the many words that I say. And of those many words that I say, those words are really nothing compared to what I think, which is really nothing compared to not really the deepest part of my soul. Words are bad communicators of who I really am. They try their best, they do their best, but it can never fully convey the person. That's why when someone passes away, we can say there's a much deeper connection to some extent. They're not limited to their body. The body limits how much of the soul can be revealed. Body places a limitation on the soul, similar to a spacesuit places a limitation on a person. You need the spacesuit because you can't interact in space without the spacesuit, but it's a very clumsy suit. Similarly, the body is a clumsy suit for the soul. And so those words did emanate from my soul, but they're really nothing compared to my entire soul. So let's take a look how this plays out with God. So he says, the Tanya now recaps the illustration we learned earlier. The source of the language in the soul, separate entity of creations, are literally void in his presence, just like the component letters of speech and thought are voided in their pre-linguistic source, which is the deep core of the soul, namely Sorry. Namely, the soul's 10 powers. Chochmah Bina Das, at which point letters are not yet crystallized, since this is before expression takes place in the garment of thought. So we're saying like this, we're saying a word, any sentence that I've said existed before inside of me. So let us imagine, let's say I say a sentence, but let's now imagine that sentence while it's still inside of me. It's really nothing. It's really subsumed within my persona, within my soul. And so the same thing we're saying is God is everywhere. And so how did God create the world? Anybody remembers how did God create the world? Anybody? It's in Genesis. How did God create the world? Nobody wants to take the mantle over here to answer? You have to unmute.
Through
You
the
have to unmute.
Torah,
What?
through the Torah.
It says he looked in the Torah, but how did he actually create the world? What did he do? Did he take a hammer?
He spoke and the world came into being.
Yes, very good. So God spoke. So God spoke the world into being. He spoke. So this is where the parable really fits. Yes, God spoke and the world came into being. But since God is everywhere, so unlike when I speak, that speech is now external of myself. So though within my soul, it's really nullified within my whole persona, my soul. But outside, it looks like an entity unto itself. When God created the world and God spoke, God is everywhere. So that speech was still subsumed within him. And therefore, that speech is really nothing. And so this whole world and the whole vivifying force of this world is that speech, and that speech is within God, and therefore it's really nullified to an extent. And just as if any sentence that I say while it's still within me is really nothing. Again, considering how much I can talk. I'm a rabbi, I can talk a lot, right? And then considering how much I can speak. Sorry. Then considering how much I could think, and then even my thoughts are really not the deepest part of my soul. My thoughts are really an outer expression of my soul. When my soul is revealed, the thoughts seem to melt away. Thoughts are ways to crystallize who you are, but they're not actually an expression of yourself. So considering that God is everywhere, and this world is created through God's speech, that means this world is truly subsumed within God. As we explained at length in chapters 20 and 21, see there, in the second book of Tanya, another analogy used to illustrate the non-dual idea. Briefly, Tanya touches upon the second analogy here. So we have now first analogy, which will tell you that the whole world is subsumed within God. And we'll have a second analogy for that. And then we'll get back to why the world being subsumed within God brings you joy. So it continues. And as is explained elsewhere, a different physical example of how the separate identity of the sun's light and rays is voided inside its source. That source is the sun's physical globe seen in the sky. For also there inside the sun, the light and those rays definitely shine forth even more powerfully than they shine forth in the world of atmospheric space. But there in their source, despite their greater intensity, their separate identities, individual rays of light, is extinguished as if they simply don't exist. So, put it simply, let's start with a drop of water. Drop of water looks like something. You put it in the ocean, it doesn't look like anything. The rays of the sun here on this earth look like something because they are outside of the sun already. Once they're outside of the sun, I see the rays of the sun. But if you were to go inside of the sun, there's also light there, but you would not notice the rays, you would only notice the sun. And so similarly, this world, though there is a world, since God is everywhere, it's as if we are the rays of the sun within the sun itself. Okay? And that's a very precise analogy for how the separate identity of the world and its contents is voided in relation to its source, which is the blessed infinite light, as explained there in Shar Yichud B'Emunah at length. Now, you might ask the question, Rabbi, if the world is really within God, if we're like a person's words that are still subsumed within the person, if we're like the rays of the sun still subsumed within the sun, then why do we see ourselves as separate? Why do we see ourselves as separate? So the answer to that is God made a special trick. This is more in the second part of the Tanya. The second part of the Tanya discusses that at length. The second part of Tanya discusses very much at length how God makes this trick that God makes this trick that we think that we are separate from God. That's, so to speak, we're given a veil. We don't see the truth. So in other words, the whole world that we see is only because we don't actually see. It's only because we don't actually have the ability to see what is really going on. But if we were able to see what's going on, we actually wouldn't notice ourselves. And that's why it's so important that we don't notice what's really going on, because then we would never feel as a separate identity. So in other words, God creates this trick that we see ourselves as separate identities, even though we're not. Does it make sense? Any questions or comments? It makes sense, but we have to talk about it. Now, I do want to over here, since we're talking about this concept, and I want people to truly appreciate it, I want to share this 3-minute video that I shared when we studied this last time to give you another example of this idea of being inside God and yet not noticing it. Okay, so just to bring home this idea, because it's very important.
Whoa, Seymour? You look like you've been hit by a tidal wave.
My love life's a total wash.
What happened?
Bubbles dumped me.
No way. What'd she say?
So we're enjoying a couple drinks at the sandbar. Out of the blue, she says, we need to end this watered-down relationship.
Wow.
It gets worse. She then says I'm shallow and not capable of true love.
Why?
Because I don't believe in the ocean. She's gone off the deep end.
Seymour? You don't believe in the ocean?
Nope.
Why?
Show me the ocean, and I'll believe.
You can't see the ocean.
Why? Because he's too far? Someone somewhere in heaven, right?
No, because he's too close.
Huh?
The ocean's not someone somewhere. He's the one everywhere.
Everywhere? Then we'd be in him, and he'd be in us.
We are in him, and he is in us. There's really nothing but the ocean.
We're nothing?
No, we're drops.
We're drops in the ocean? Oh, how depressing.
No, it's pure joy. There's no greater feeling than feeling part of the greater.
Float that one by me again?
Seymour, the ocean is one. There is none but the one. And you are someone, some of the one. You're a part of him.
Gil, you're either brainwashed or drunk.
I am drunk. I'm drunk with love. I cannot but love the ocean. And I cannot but love everyone down to the...
Right, so I think you get the idea. It's another good parable. It's not exactly what's brought in the Tanya, but it's a similar concept that we are subsumed within God, even though we don't notice it, like a drop in the ocean. The drop has this veil. He sees himself as a separate drop. We see ourselves as separate from God, but truthfully, we're all part of God, and therefore, before creation, after creation, there still is only God, because we are all subsumed within him. And this is going to be important. This idea is going to be important for joy, as you already saw in that video. But now we'll read it in the Tanya. So I just want to do switch there. Escape this, escape. Sorry, it's not working. Let me close that. Okay, let's go back to the Tanya. So he's going to say like this. He's going to make the argument that if you were to truly appreciate that we are subsumed within God, that is going to give you good reason for joy. So he says like this. Having recapped the basic contours of the non-dual idea, the Tanya now explains why on a personal level, contemplating this deep review of reality can bring you true joy, can bring you joy. So he says, now when you will probe this non-dual idea extensively, your heart will gladden and your soul will, probably says rejoice. Rejoice, yes. Your soul will rejoice. Even with joy and singing, with all your heart, soul, and might. In this faith, for it is great, since it is literally closeness to God. So he's saying, you will be happy if you know that you are one with God because of your closeness to God. And he's going to continue. And this, so here he's going to say something interesting. I don't know if I should explain it or first read it. I'm not sure. Let's continue. And this is the whole purpose of man and the reason for which it was created. And it's the whole reason for the creation of all the worlds, the upper and lower, to have hit this home in the lower worlds. So I just read that line, but really I should shoot off fireworks. So this is one of the lines the Rabbi said one should read every single day. And this is something that Tanya will discuss more at length in the later chapters, 36. But we're already giving you a hint over here. Why are we created? What is the purpose for which the entire world was created? The entire world was created to make a home for God in this world. If you've come to a Chabad house, you've probably heard this a million times. The entire reason you are created is to make a home for God. So yes, a mitzvah connects you with God. Yes, Torah study connects you with God. But what is the purpose of you connecting with God? You could have just stayed in heaven. Well, the purpose of connecting with God is to bring God down here. When you connect with God through a mitzvah, you bring God down into this world. When you connect to God through Torah, you bring God down into this world. So let's continue. A central theme of Hasidic thought, which will be explored in the coming chapters, is the midrashic idea that God created the universe in order to have a dira b'tachtonim, a home in the lower worlds. Here in chapter 33, a dira b'tachtonim is understood to mean thinking about God in a non-dual way. Whenever you are aware that the separate identity of all creation is literally voided in his presence, then your consciousness becomes a home for God in the lower worlds, as the concept of Dir B'Tachton will be explained later on at length in chapters 36 to 37 and 49. So here he's saying, even thinking about God's non-dual oneness makes your mind into a home for God. This is an especially powerful source of joy because A, it affects your inner world, and B, it's available to you always at any time, at any place. So, before we continue, what he's saying here is that if you meditate about God and how this whole world is one with God, not only do you not have to wait for a mitzvah in order to bring God into this world, just the fact that you have used your mind to feel God everywhere, that alone brings God into this world. This is why the study of Hasidic philosophy, definitely certain elements of it, are so important. Understanding the non-dual, understanding the oneness of God with the world is so important because just, even before you do a mitzvah, study Torah, just contemplating and thinking about the oneness of God in your life and in the world around you brings God down here into this world in a revealed way. That's really what it is. In other words, what do we mean we bring God into this world? God's already here. We mean to bring God in a revealed way into this world. I can accomplish that through study of Torah. I can accomplish that through mitzvos. And I can also accomplish that through my thoughts, through feeling God everywhere, through meditation of God everywhere. I am bringing God into my life in a revealed way. I am feeling him everywhere. That's to a certain extent, that's what prayer is about. Prayer is, though prayer may not technically be a mitzvah or a biblical mitzvah, prayer can make us feel God here in this world. And that will be a great reason for joy, as he's going to explain in a moment. That feeling God in your life is going to be a great reason for joy. Any questions? Because I've been talking a lot. Any questions or comments? Nope. Okay, so then I'll continue along on this point. Take a look here. But I cannot stress enough the importance of that line. Because as he writes here in the practical lesson, and this is important to read also, when you think about how everything is dissolved in God's presence, you will feel the joy of being very close to God. In other words, when you think about the closeness of God, you are actually close to God, because he is actually here. We just don't recognize him. So thinking about God being everywhere allows you to feel it, and that allows you to be joyous about that. Let's continue. So now he's going to explain why is it so joyous to feel close to God. And so it's interesting to explain an emotion, but he will explain the emotion. So he says, now imagine the immense joy of an ordinary person, the most lowly of men, if a human king were to come close to him by lodging and permanently living with him in his humble little house. Right? So people don't necessarily appreciate a king, but let's imagine your icon. You know, think of someone that you truly respect, truly love, you truly honor. Maybe your favorite rabbi or rebbitzin. Okay, and they move into your home. You'd be honored, sure, right? I would move into your home, you'd be honored, right? But no, but on a serious point, though I don't, hold myself very high, but I know, like, when I visit some people in their homes or in the hospital or wherever, they like say, wow, I feel so honored that you're here. Maybe they wouldn't be so honored if I stayed in their house, because, I take up more space than God does. Or I should say I make myself felt too much, but to some extent, that's the idea, is it's an honor. Wow. Feel it's a great feeling when someone great chooses to be with you and you're not that great. Or let's say you it's really throughout life. I don't need to explain the feeling. I think most of you have experienced this in your life. A great mentor, a person who showed care and concern for you, even if they didn't come to your house. If a great person that you respect shows care and concern for you, that will make you feel good, make you feel happy. He says, and really, honestly, that's what most people are looking for in life. Most people are looking for in life someone that cares about them. I may go off on a slight tangent. Most people in life, okay, we got some people who they would like to stay in their house. So most people in life, they want to know that there's someone that cares about them. They want to feel that personal connection. So if that applies to a human being, how much more so would that apply if we could feel it about God? We feel that God is close to me. He cares about me. He wants to stick around and hang around me. That would definitely make us feel good, feel wanted, right? How many people in this world feel unwanted or unloved or uncared for, or don't feel a part? And then they find someone who cares about them, and that makes them feel good. Now imagine if we could all realize that God does the same thing to us. So he says, how much more so, to an immeasurably greater extent, did you be happy at the thought of the King, the blessed King of Kings, making his intimate home with you? As the verse asks rhetorically, for who is the one that has devoted his heart sufficiently to come close to me, says God. The prophet laments that in the natural course of things, it is impossible to come really close to God, but that's only without the gift of non-dual wisdom. To the insight of Hasidic teachings, God will come so close to you that his address actually becomes yours. So this is meditation number 1 to think about. A meditation that will bring joy. When we think about this idea that truthfully, God is everywhere. And when I actually contemplate God's oneness everywhere, I will get to feel him, and he is very, very close to me. And if I would love my mentor to come stay in my house, how much more so I'd love God to stick around with me. And God is sticking around with me. The truth is, it happens whether you realize it or not. But if you're cognizant of it, then it'll automatically bring joy. That is his first point. So what's important about this idea also is that the closeness of God is really in all areas of your life, whether you are technically doing a mitzvah now or whether you're not technically doing a mitzvah now, assuming you're serving God in general, right? So if I'm exercising is not really technically a mitzvah, but it is part of my service of God to take care of my body. God is there with me then. Whatever I'm doing in life, if I'm working, if I'm sleeping, whatever I'm doing in life, God can be there with me. Just to read to you from the Hayom Yom, the Rebbe's daily teaching for every single day. I just want to read this to you because it really brings on what we're saying right now. He writes here, an emissary is one with his sender in Jewish law. So if I send you to do a mission for me, you are as if an extension of me. This concept is similar to that of an angel acting as divine emissary when he's actually called by God's name. If this is so with an angel, it is certainly true of a soul. In fact, the quality of this oneness is of a higher order, as explained elsewhere. So he's saying, if an angel is considered an extension of God, to the point that the Torah can say, God told me, even when really it was an angel, right? In the Torah, the Tanakh, sometimes it says God said, even though it was really an angel speaking. Surely, when we do God's work, when we are doing the mission of God, God is one with us. Then he continues. Now, Chassidim are the emissaries of the Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe. So if a Chassid actively discharges his mission, he is bound up with his Rebbe, bound up in his entire being. And here he says the line that I wanted to say. There walks a Chassid, there eats a Chassid, there sleeps a Chassid. The point is, you can get to a point where everything you're doing, in this case, he was referring to, being one with being an emissary of the Rebbe, whatever he was doing, being a Chassid. And of course, same thing applies to Hashem. Wow, much more so. Is that when we do and live our lives and our thoughts and our action, our thoughts, speech, and action is in accordance with God, then we are tapping into God's non-dual oneness, and we can feel close to God, whether we are sleeping, whether we are eating, whether we are working, whether we are driving a car. So let us just imagine for a moment, you are going through a rough period in your life. Your business is tough and expenses are going up and mortgages are difficult. And you take a moment and you think about, you know what? It's a big, bad world. It's not a bad world. This is a big world that is truly just subsumed within God. I feel God here with me right now. He's with me right now. There's not going to be any greater joy. God is with you right there at that moment. He's always with you, but now you recognize it. And everybody would love for any great person to be with them, how much more so realizing that God is with you at every step of the way will bring you joy. And that's basically the first reason to be happy, is to know God is there with you. God is there with you. What is there to be sad about? The greatest of all, the Holy One, blessed be He. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He Himself, is right now with you. And He's with you through the ups and the downs, rights and lefts. You're always one with Him. Okay, let us read a little bit further. So now he continues. So he says that this idea and this contemplation and understanding and imagining that you are one with God should bring you happiness is actually the reason for a certain prayer that we say in the morning. So he says like this. This is why it's established that every morning we offer praise and thanksgiving to God's name when we say, happy are we, how good is our portion, how pleasant is our lot, how beautiful our heritage. Beautiful prayer. Every single morning we say, Ashreinu matov chalkeinu. Happy are we, how good is our portion. Umayat, how pleasant is our lot, how beautiful is our heritage. In other words, that's just a natural expression when you feel lucky of what you have. To be grateful is, you know what, I'd put it like this. In order to be grateful, one has to be able to be, to notice, to be cognizant. We're too busy rushing in life, or too busy sometimes focusing on our problems. We don't take a breath to appreciate. To be able to appreciate means to take a pause sometimes. So as long as we continue rushing in life, we may not have the moment of appreciation. But in the morning prayers, for sure, we can take that moment of appreciation, thanking God for our luck. So what are we thanking God for? In other words, just as a person would rejoice greatly if he were to inherit an immense fortune for which he didn't do any work, so too, and immeasurably, and immensely more so, ought we to rejoice at the inheritance we have received from our ancestors, the truth of God's non-dual unity, that even on the earth below, there is no one besides him. In addition to the joy of your awareness of God's presence in all things, you should also celebrate the fact that the secret came to you without having earned it. If you had not learned about the non-dual reality, God would have remained distant from you. So thank him every day for your access to this wisdom and your soul's ability to appreciate it. It's your sacred inheritance. And the awareness of a devotion of God's non-dual reality, it is his home in the lower world. So I actually wrote a note here, and you can see that my study of the Tanya tells me that we thank Hashem for our ability to truly appreciate and feel the oneness of God. And in my notes, I write here that the ability to fully feel God's oneness is only given to a Jewish soul. Why? Because only a Jewish soul is truly at its deepest place one with God. And so when we thank Hashem for feeling him, we're also thanking him for our ability to truly feel him to the fullest extent. And I want to explain this actually as this is expressed in Jewish law. Jewish law actually says that people who are not Jewish are allowed to believe what's called shituf. They can believe that God is the head God, so to speak, and that he has many gods under him. For a Gentile, such a belief is not antithetical to them. For a Jew, we must believe in one God. They don't have to have that belief. Now, there is a point where what they believe in can become idol worship. So that's why you have to be careful of this. But the point is that they can have a certain belief that is not fully a belief in the one God. Why? Because our belief is that that is not, their connection to God is not as direct and one as ours. Now, listen, you're going to ask me the question, Rabbi, I see some people believe more, and I can't speak to that. I can only speak to what is taught, and I can only speak to what it says in the mysticism and about the souls. You know, we speak about in other areas of Tanya as well, that every Jewish soul, deep down, they believe. You find some people who don't seem they believe. Listen, let's tell you what it says, and I believe in it. I say. So the point is that we believe that by virtue of being given a Jewish soul, we have been given this beautiful ability to feel God in a very, very close manner. Now, Gentiles can also feel God, but what he's saying is the closeness that we can feel is more than others. That's the benefit of the Jewish soul. That might also be why in Judaism we believe that Jewish people have to do more mitzvahs. We are, in other words, we are given more to do because we're given more abilities. It's fine. Okay. And also, as I always say, if anybody wants to convert, they can convert and gain the Jewish soul. But for someone to convert And this now actually makes sense for someone to convert and gain that extra awareness, and then not to use it to do the extra mitzvos is a waste. So we don't just convert people if they're not willing to do the mitzvos. We don't just want to convert someone so that they can marry someone, right? So if someone wants to get married, can you convert my girlfriend, my boyfriend, whatever it is? Not just going to convert someone if they're not going to do the mitzvahs. Because why would we give someone this extra awareness and not to use it? It's a waste. It's a waste of a godly soul, and it's not nice. It's not right. But anyways, going back to our point here, what he's trying to say here is that if we meditate about this idea that truthfully everything is subsumed within God, and not only that, that God gave me this special soul that allows me to feel God everywhere, then I will be so happy and grateful to God for everything that He has given me. I'm not sure I got a question here, really. I'm not sure what the question is. So if you want to explain. Anyways, okay. That is reason number one to be happy. That is reason number one, that we have this beautiful gift from God that we did not work on. That is that ability to feel the oneness of God. And so here, by the way, I always say that Tanya is the book of instructions, not the actual book of doing, if I would want to put it that way. So the actual book of Tanya here does not go at length of how you can actually feel the non-dual reality of God and everything. That is what all the other books of Hasidic philosophy do. So people wonder, why don't I just study the Tanya? Why didn't I study the other books of Hasidic philosophy? All the books of Hasidic philosophy are to help us feel the oneness of God, the Torah and the mitzvahs and the world around us. And that's really the purpose and the job of what Hasidic philosophy does in all these different areas. So let us now continue how this idea plays out in making our lives much easier. So now it continues. Below in chapter 36, 37, we learn that God's home in the lower worlds is made through mitzvah observance. Yet here in chapter 33, the emphasis appears to be different. We are taught that God's home is made through conscious faith in the non-dual reality. So where is God's home to be found? In your faith or in your mitzvahs? Tanya now clarifies that the two are intrinsically connected, two sides of the same coin, so to speak. In other words, we just made it sound like just feeling God alone, that brings God into your life. So why do I need to do mitzvahs? So he answers and he says like this. He says, and this explains the teaching of our sages of blessed memory. 613 mitzvahs were given to Israel, but Habakkuk came and hinged them on one. As the verse states, the tzaddik will be enlivened by his faith. So he says again, the tzaddik will be enlivened by his faith. So our sages say that all 630 commandments can be summed up in one verse of Habakkuk. Habakkuk was one of the prophets, and he writes that tzaddik will be enlivened by his faith. So now the Tanya can explain it. In other words, it's as if there was just one mitzvah, namely the mitzvah of faith in God alone, because it's through faith alone that you come to observe all 613 mitzvahs commandments. That's what he means. How are all the commandments included in faith? Because faith will bring you to observe all 613 commandments. As he explains, when you are grounded in the non-dual faith, mitzvah observance flows naturally from it. I'm going to read that again because it's so important. When you're grounded in non-dual faith, mitzvah observance flows naturally from it. What you want is that you should get to a place where it's not a struggle to do a mitzvah, but doing a mitzvah should be naturally what you want to do. So if you can work on a non-dual faith where you see God everywhere, automatically you're going to want to do a mitzvah. As he explains, the mitzvahs are no longer perceived as a long list of commands issued to you. Sorry, back up. Right? What makes mitzvah so hard? I got to do this, and I got to do that, and I got to do that. I got to take 2 days off here, and 3 days off here, and then 5 days off here. Rather, you feel God's presence powerfully and intimately, and that motivates you to connect Him at every opportunity through mitzvah observance. A crucial ingredient for this flow from faith to observance is joy. So again, I need to believe in God. my belief should lead me to observing. And the bridge that connects those two is joy, as he's going to explain and will explain. Meaning that when your heart finds happiness and joy in your faith in God's non-dual oneness. In other words, you can believe that God is everywhere. You can also be annoyed by that. If you find, because remember, joy is an energizing energy. It's an energy that makes you want to get up and do something. If there's no joy in your faith, it may just be acceptance. Okay? If your faith can just be an acceptance level. You have to make sure your faith is in a matter of joy. That's why he went on to explain at length how we have to be happy and thankful for our lot and the ability to feel God and the knowledge that God is everywhere. I should be happy about that, because if I'm not happy, then it's just acceptance. You need joy, because joy is an energizing energy. So he continues, and I'll just read that again, meaning that when your heart will find happiness and joy in your faith in God's non-dual oneness, as much happiness as can be, as if you had just this one mitzvah to observe, and this one mitzvah alone is the ultimate purpose for which you and all the worlds have been created, then through the strength and energy that your soul will derive from this great happiness, your soul will be uplifted to overcome anything preventing you internally or externally from observing all 630 commandments. Let's read this. A mitzvah is faith concretized in action. While faith remains inside your heart and mind, it's more luminous and intense. In the mitzvah act, your faith is more manifest and contagious. I don't know if I like what he's writing here, but anyways, whenever you are feeling your faith or expressing it in action, you're making a home for God. I don't know about the paragraph, but anyways, the point is that, as he says on the side, contemplating your non-dual faith, meaning your understanding everything is one with God, and then being happy for that should lead to joy. Your gratefulness for that should lead to joy, which will invigorate you to do a mitzvah. And you will not view that you have many mitzvahs to do. It's all oneness of God. It's all you're seeking. You know, if you walk around all day seeking oneness of God, so I do it through here and I do it through here, I do it through this and I do it through that. It's all one thing. It's not many different things that I need to do. It's like, let's take, for example, let's say you enjoy cleaning, right? If you enjoy cleaning, some people do. Okay, some people do it, and sometimes I do as well, so I can appreciate that's what I'm talking about. If you enjoy cleaning and you're energized, you get up, I want to clean up. You don't say, oh my gosh, I got to throw out the bowl, and I got to throw out the cup, and I got to throw out the fork, and I got to put this in the dishwasher, and I got to put this in recycling. It's not all separate things. You're cleaning, you're in the act of cleaning, and it feels good. However, if it's a chore that your parents are putting upon you, your spouse is putting upon you, or something like that, then every single item you pick up is like annoying. It's like annoying. You don't want to do it. I have to do it, but you don't want to do it. So the same thing is here. If mitzvos are, a chore, then every mitzvah is a drag. Yeah, I got to keep Shabbos on, and I can't do this on Shabbos, and I can't do that on Shabbos, and I have to do this, and I have to do that. And during the weekday, I have to do this, and I have to daven every morning. It becomes a chore. But if you are walking around your day, always wanting to feel closeness to God, then every mitzvah is just a detail of wanting to do it. And that's what Habakkuk means, that he made all the mitzvahs one. If you have a faith that is joyous, that is enlivening, then we'd all be tzaddikim. That's basically what he's saying. It's tzaddik through faith alone. That's how he does it. So if we had faith like a tzaddik all the time, we would always do the right thing. But we don't. All right. But as much as we can bring it, we'll be doing better. So let's read this here. This explains the verse cited by the Talmud. The tzaddik will be enlivened by his faith. The precise use of the word will be enlivened, points to an invigorating property of faith. Through this joy, your soul will be invigorated like the future revival does, so to speak. The Talmud itself doesn't specify joy as the crucial ingredient that leads from faith into action, but the Talmud does hint to the presence of some invigorating force with a word that tzaddik will be enlivened by the faith, and that force that Tanya suggests is joy, the feeling of aliveness that propels us into action. So we're going to stop here because this is point number 1. And again, this chapter is all we're trying to push ourselves to be able, we're having trouble. We have a blockage in our spiritual life. And this is one way in which we can overcome the blockage, and by being able to bring ourselves, but by understanding our faith and allowing our faith to bring us joy, then automatically doing the mitzvahs will become easy. And through that, we make a home for God here on this earth, which is our mission. And this is why Chabad, as you can imagine, brings joy into everything we do. We like to bring joy. Chabad is very much into joy, because we understand through joy, that's the best way to be able to do the mitzvahs. If you're trying to get someone to do Judaism, best way is through joy. It's unfortunate that so many times parents inadvertently give their kids a bad feeling towards Judaism. If they're forcing them into something, trying to force them to do some Judaism, even Orthodox parents. I'm not saying it's limited to Reform conservative or non-involved. And it's always very important. I talk about this with parents a lot when they bring their kids for bar mitzvah. Make sure let's find a happy medium. Obviously, people need to be pushed a little bit. Nobody gets anywhere without being pushed. We have to find a happy medium. Don't push the kid too much just because you want to see them do something at the podium, because we need to make sure that they always feel joyous and good about bar mitzvah. And that's unfortunately why it became this joke that kids, after they become bar mitzvah, they stop showing up to synagogue because it was a chore. It was a chore. There was no joy in it. We need to make sure there's a joy. Chabad, we try and bring the kids joy. That's my main focus. I want when kids graduate Hebrew school, the knowledge they get in Hebrew school is going to be minimal, because how much can they really gain? How much can they really, unless they're really brilliant kids, most of them will forget it over time. The more important thing is that they feel a joy and a connection to Judaism, that Judaism will always feel good to them. If you go to Jewish day school, sure, you can pick up a lot. You go to Hebrew school once a week for an hour or two a week, there's only so much knowledge you can pick up. So obviously they can learn Hebrew. Reading is one skill, but the knowledge, there's a limit of the knowledge. The main thing that we try and pass on to them is feeling joy. Because if they can feel joyous in Judaism, we've set them up, hopefully, for the future for some success. So, l'chaim, may you all experience joy in Judaism, and that will be the ultimate way to overcome all blockages that you may have in leading your Jewish life.